Did you know that there are at least 23 million American adults who can't read a want-ad?
It's called reading. Top to bottom, left to right. Group words together as a sentence.
Money Life presents.
I'm chatting with my guest, author, lecturer.
You get him to open his mind and his future.
The Book Interview.
Give a kid a book and you'll give a kid a break.
That's gonna be radical, Chuck.
Reading is good. Can we start the story now?
We sure can, and the story we're talking about today is a new book out by my guest, Paul Daneshrad. It is Money and Morons, How to Build Wealth and Protect Yourself from the Great Conflux. If you want to learn more, well, Paul is the founder and CEO of Starpoint Properties, a private real estate firm. You can go to starpointproperties.com to get more information on him, and you will find information there about the book. Paul Daneshrad, welcome to Money Life.
Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate being here.
So we need to kind of start this one right at the basics, because how to build wealth and protect yourself from the Great Conflux. The Great Conflux, you're going to have to explain what it is, but the fact is, no matter who you are, no matter what you do, this is what we are about to be living through, or we're already living through, right?
Yeah, we're already living through it, but it's only going to get worse and much worse. And the Great Conflux is basically the intersection of two or three things that are happening for the first time in human history. I want to stress that, literally the first time in human history. And that is, debts and deficits at a structural level that is not going to be solved, an aging population that we've never really seen before, and human longevity that continues to extend out, but is now reaching levels where we haven't properly planned for it. And so, debt, aging population, and human longevity is what I call the Great Conflux.
We should point out, morons in this case are politicians, are leaders. And it's not really, as I was reading the book, it was not really about any sort of partisan politics. It was more just kind of looking at politicians and what they've done.
Uh-oh, we got a moron here.
Yeah, we're just not looking at folks who have made good decisions, right?
Yeah, moron is a really broad term for moronic policy decisions, but the moronic part of the book really starts with the voting populace, right? Our voters who are, going to the ballot box and trying to make decisions based on expediency, right? Fix the problem today, make my life easier today, and not worrying about tomorrow. We're in a society now with just immediate gratification, and we don't look past maybe 2 or 3 years. Maybe some of us will go out 4 or 5. We want just immediate gratification. We want immediate satisfaction. We're just an entitled society. So the morons start with the voters, because at the end of the day, no matter how much we love to blame the politicians, right, we do have control. We do get to vote, and we do get to decide who goes to Congress and what their priorities are. And we're making the wrong decisions. And
yet, as a society, and the wrong decision, and again, we try on this show, we don't avoid politics completely, but we stay as agnostic as we can. And like I said, the book sort of gets that way. I can't control what other voters do. I can control what I do in response, not only to other voters, but to the circumstances. And what the book is really driving at is the time to start planning for the problems that are coming is right now, because all you have to do is have your own longevity issues to know you need to be planning for this, right?
Absolutely. If you look at how many years, life expectancy used to be sort of 50, 55. So we would die right at the time when we would retire. So you didn't need much savings for retirement. Well, that's changed a little bit. Average life expectancy, let's call it 75. I'm rounding down. And you retire at 65. So you got 10 years of retirement that you have to save for. But what happens when we live to 100? And that is coming for sure, no question. Retire at 65. Now you have 35 years of retirement that you have to save for. And our savings rate is at the lowest it's been in decades. So we got the lowest savings rate with the largest increase in retirement years that we've ever seen. Great Conflux. And yeah, this is not a partisan issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democratic issue. This is not an issue East Coast versus West Coast. This is not tribal. This is universal problem. Even the debts, it's not a Republican or Democratic issue, right? The Republicans and the Democrats have added to the debt or the deficit equally, pretty much, right? So it's a voter issue. We have to decide, are we going to allow the debts and the deficits and the lack of a savings rate lead to crisis? And crisis is going to solve this problem for us, which is what I believe. Crisis is going to solve it because now we're at a point where this issue is so large, so complicated, so difficult to solve, it's now structural. And what I mean by structural, it's not going to be solved.
When you look at the things that are coming together and you talk about a crisis, is the crisis going to be something that is as complicated as, the great financial crisis that we saw back in 2008? Or is it going to be as simple as you get the kind of inflation we've seen and everybody gets really upset? Because it seems like right now we're going through with whatever the party politics are and whatever the line is, where whatever problems we're facing, they're caused by the other guy. And as long as we have that and we lack civility, there's no way to move forward.
Oh yeah, again, pointing fingers is exactly why we have a structural problem, right? We got part of the population that says, okay, let's solve the problem by increasing taxes. We have another part of the population that says, no, we need to reduce expenditures, right? We need to reduce costs. We need to bring down entitlements. We need to reduce services. And combination of the both happens. Some people, no, I don't want to raise taxes. And no, I don't want, to lower Social Security, or I don't want to lower Medicare, which are the two largest expenditures within the federal budget. And so it's a lot of pointing fingers, and that's why it's structural. That's why it's not going to be solved. The voting populace is not going to come together and recognize how serious of a problem this is and vote for austerity or vote for pain, right? Vote for discomfort. No, we want gratification now, and we're just going to try to kick in the can down the road. And crisis is going to come. Now, the great financial crisis, that was nothing. We were able to stimulate our way out of that, right? We were able to print money and just increase the debt by an astronomical amount and solve the problem, right? It was scary. A few people suffered. There were some big firms that, failed. But at the end of the day, the broad society, there was no 30% unemployment, right? There was no collapse of the monetary system, really. When I talk about crisis, and when you look at, nation states, when they fail due to too much debt, you're talking about real crisis.
And so what kind of time frame? Obviously the things are here. The great conflux you talk about in the book is happening or starting or somewhere in that process now. What's your estimate for how long we have to try to sidestep this, if at all possible?
I try to be really factual and somewhat scientific with my approach to this and the education around it, so that there isn't any hyperbole or sort of any type of theatrics, right? Really grounded, really solid information, and really try to get to the root issues so that if we can solve them, we try. But if we can't solve them, then we really come up with solutions down at the family level to protect ourselves. And that's really what the book's about, right? Protecting yourself, your family from what is a crisis that's coming and it's not going to be solved. And so when you say how much time, I'm really careful in trying to estimate that, because no one really knows. The crisis will come when there's a loss of confidence, and no one, including myself, can really project or predict that really well. So I'm careful. So I'm going to give an estimate, and it's a really broad estimate because I want to be careful. I want to be very factual. I want to be really concrete with everything we talk about. And so I think we have about 20 to 40 years. And where do I come up with 20 to 40 years? The leading thinkers, I believe, on this issue are two economists coming out of Harvard and the IMF, Reinhardt and Rogoff. They wrote a book called This Time is Different. Very sort of academic book looking at debts and deficits over, a span of about 100 years and, across the world, and looked at when did nations fail based on their debt and deficits load. And one of their conclusions was that once you get past 100% debt to GDP, nations start to feel stress and they can't get back from that level of debt. So 100% debt to GDP was one of their thresholds. Today, we're at 120% debt to GDP in the United States. So we've passed that threshold, and we're on a trajectory to get to about 200% debt to GDP within 10 to 15 years. And that is an absolute, failure rate, 210 or 10% debt to GDP. There's really no countries that have ever really been able to come back from that level. And that's not even looking at unfunded liabilities. So we have something called the Congressional Budget Office, nonpartisan, the CBO, Democrats, Republicans, Independents will all say the same thing. The CBO is meant to be independent and just give Congress hard data that they can make decisions based on. The CBO right now shows that we have about 129 trillion. Right, let's put that into context. 129 trillion unfunded liabilities. 95 million of that is Social Security and Medicare. What does that mean? These are future liabilities that we have not accounted for, but we are going to have to pay, and they don't have any budget for. So 95 million is Social Security and Medicare liabilities that are coming forward, and our current debt is 33 million. So if you take the entire 129 trillion in unfunded liabilities that is coming, that's 4x our current debt level of 33 trillion. 4x. That's going to put us at 400% debt to GDP. That's crisis. No question. That is absolute crisis. And that's all going to happen in the next, call it 20 years.
Well, and obviously the book goes beyond talking about that to sort of say how people can and should prepare themselves. I wish we had more time to talk about all that. We do not. But now that we're sufficiently scared, well, hopefully some folks will go and check out the book and everyone will want to prepare themselves better. Paul, thanks so much for joining me on the show to talk about it.
Chuck, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Great to be on the show.
That's Paul Daneshrad. He's the author of Money and Morons, How to Build Wealth and Protect Yourself from the Great Conflux. He's founder and CEO of Starpoint Properties, starpointproperties.com. And we'll be back with more of Money Life right after this message. Stick around for that.